This Grim Reaper build leverages the insane power of the Umbral spells and the withered damage to chunk massive amounts of enemy health while having a cute little Eye Guardian to protect you. Let's go! Let me know what other builds you would like in the comments down below. So this build focuses on withered damage and having the support of the Umbral Guardian. But firstly, we'll talk about the withered damage. So this is unique to Lords of the Fallen, and it's really good at, especially in the Umbral realm, as basically everything in the Umbral realm is weak to withered damage, but it's also great just in the open world, as it's the same as when you soulflay enemies, how you can deal withered damage to them, and then you can trigger that effect to chunk off enemies. You're essentially just doing this with every attack. So there's not really much of a downside, even if they are resistant to it. And when you combine this with actually soulflaying, you'll chunk off even more of that enemy's health. And then when you trigger that like pop on them, it's just a huge amount of damage. The Umbral spells as well is just like very powerful across the board with a good mix of like damage and support spells. The main one that, we're talking about in the intro is the Umbral Guardian, which will summon like a little eye that'll follow you around and will deal with the damage over time. I would like this to last a little bit longer as it's pretty short, but it's a relatively cheap cost. You can sort of continually summon it, especially as you enter boss arenas or just like weaving it in between fights. And I'm combining this with the Umbral weapon to imbue my weapon with even more Umbral magic, just for that extra damage potential that comes from that. And the weapon I am using is the Nahuta Polearm, which is a great withered damage weapon that can be two-handed, because two-handing polearms, the attack animations are actually still pretty quick. Like, if you follow me across any of my builds, I'm not really a one to use these sort of two-handed like heavy builds. I love like attacking quickly and also like being able to combine different things, and this is essentially a great combination of that sort of style with being able to two-hand the polearm and having quick enough animations with some great stab animations plus some great cleave animations with the polearm. So you've got a really good breadth of options here. Plus it also does a little bit of frostbite build-up, but for the most part you won't trigger that on enemies, as they often die before that effect actually goes off. So breaking everything down here, starting out with the starting class, the Pirate Cultist or the Preacher is probably one of the best here, and then invest in either Radiance or Inferno depending on what option you chose. Or you could go say the Halo Knight or the Partisan, like I'm a Partisan here, and then just invest in Radiance and Inferno, because they will be your main stats. And when we're talking about attributes, Radiance and Inferno will definitely be your main stats, and then Vitality to get that as high as possible for that HP, and you'll get plenty from that. And your mana you sort of get from the Radiance and Inferno anyway, so you don't have to invest in that separately. But you'll at least need 22 Radiance and Inferno to use the Umbral Guardian spell, so at least get those to that point, and then bump up your Vitality. For your spells, we've already touched on a couple here, but you can grab a Catalyst if you don't have one from Molnu at the Skyrest Bridge, but you could also like find one out in the world, like the one that I'm currently using I just like found, but even the one that you get from them is absolutely fine. Though the Umbral Orb, like the base like cheap spell, is actually really good. It does with the damage and it has a pretty fast attack animation. You will switch this out for Latimer's Javelin once you've beaten the Hushed Saint boss, because it comes from their remembrance. This is one of the best spells in the game, as it's an AoE ranged spell that does incredible damage and hits a ton of targets because its AoE is really large, and you can like ping this at enemies from a great distance as well. So I use this all the time. Anytime you come across those like tough enemies you don't really want to get close to, or like groups of enemies in the Umbral realm, you can just sort of like hang back and like pop this and deal decent damage from range. I'm also using the Umbral weapon as mentioned to imbue the weapon with Umbral magic. You could use like poison weapon as well, like as an alternative here if you wanted to like spice things up in a different way. The Umbral Guardian is also a must now. You will get all of these spells from Molnu, by the way, but the Umbral Guardian, as mentioned, will just deal periodic damage to all of the enemies around you, and as we're already dealing with the damage, applying even more to them is great, especially for bosses, because there's tons of times with like bosses that are just like spamming attacks, you can't actually hit them, and having the Guardian there to actually hit them during those times is really good. And then when you do get like that one little hit in, because of the withered health, you're actually chunking off more than you would just by, just like dealing one little hit to them. So they're really beneficial for bosses and just all of those encounters. And poison is also great for bosses, right, because of the tick damage that it does do. But the further you progress in the game, you'll be able to get these from Molnu and the Remembrances as well, but most of the Umbral spells do come from them. For the gear you need for this build, the Polearm comes from the Sunless Skein, basically towards the very end of this area in like the sewer region. Like you'll come across an area in the Umbral realm where there's like a belly pod that you'll be able to grab this from. I can't remember exactly where it is, but it's like in this sort of general area, so hopefully that helps. If you don't like the Polearm or you can't find find it or you want something different, you could run Rosamund's sword, which is very similar, right? Like it scales with Radiance and Inferno. It also does Frostbite, and it's a long sword, so it has some decent animations as well. This comes from Lower Cathrath, which is a little bit earlier in the game, so you'll be able to get that a bit earlier, but there's other Umbral type weapons as well that can be basically, all of them are sort of found in the Umbral realm, and you can obviously tell because of their scaling, but there's plenty of really good options here if you wanted to choose something different other than the Polearm. I'm also using the Pale Eye Shield, which I didn't mention earlier, and I'm not actually using this literally at all. It's just going to sit on my back because I have a gem slotted in it that gives mana regen. So just by having this equipped, you get that mana regen, but you don't actually use it like literally ever. You'll just like two-hand the Polearm. You could use it if you wanted to, but it's just essentially there for that mana regen. For the catalyst, we already talked about where you can grab a catalyst from. The Faceless Carving increases your wither damage, which also comes from Molu. As an alternative, you can run the Pennant of Parting, which will spawn like a little like wither mine on the ground sometimes, which is actually pretty fun to use sometimes as well. The Mine Owner's Ring is great for this build because it increases your max stamina and your stamina regen. Now, polearms are very stamina hungry weapons, and you will need some endurance for this build, but because having, say, Radius and Inferno needing them to be so high, this is a very like stat hungry build, so being able to supplement that with a ring is really beneficial. And the Ring of Knight's Fire will also increase your wither damage even further. It does increase your fire damage as well if you wanted to spice in a little bit of fire. And armor wise, it's really up to you, right? Like you can wear any armor you like. I am wearing basically the Angel of Void set here because it just like looks cool. I've also just put on like a different mask than my other build because, you know, we're just like spicing of life here and it's all about the fashion. But yeah, you can really wear whatever armor you like. Some tips for this build: make sure you stock up on the mana stones. You can get these from the blacksmith or find them in the Umbral realm and sort of around. These are great because they heal your mana. Now we will get some mana regen from the shield as mentioned, so it's not like a huge deal, but you'll definitely want to have them, especially for boss fights where you're going to be like spamming spells. You'll want to have a little bit of regen option, so having the mana stone on your hotbar is definitely beneficial. Now because this is both a Radius and an Inferno build, you could run the rings that allow you to use Radius or Inferno spells without actually having the catalyst equipped. Now if you wanted to go either of these routes, I'd probably go Radius because they're like have the healing spells, which give you a bit more benefit than say running the Inferno fire damage spells, and most enemies in the game are like resistant to fire, so there's not a huge option or reason to run that, especially when the Umbral spells are so good. But getting access to the support and healing spells of the Radius line, you could definitely grab. I'd also be like kicking enemies all of the time, especially when they have a full withered health bar. You can like kick them to just like kill them, so it's really beneficial for that because it's a quick animation. It's much quicker than just like attacking with the polearm. There's tons of enemies that'll just like swing at you. You can kick them, stagger them, and then actually swing back with your polearm or something like that. So because this isn't an like defensive build that you could use the shield, kicking as like an offensive way to stagger enemies is really good, but the polearm will stagger most enemies anyway, but you've got like that option as well. Being that this is like a stat hungry build, it will take time to come together. Now you may want to say respec into this build later on, or like sort of slowly build towards it and just use sort of whatever weapons you have and maybe focus on say Inferno or Radius initially and then slowly build up the other stat, because yeah, it will take you a while to get this build going. And this is a mid-game build that we are sort of showing off here, but it's definitely really fun and I've had a great time putting this build together. It just takes a bit to get going, but you'll definitely enjoy it. It's worth the effort to put this build together. So let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Thank you guys for watching this video till the end. Thank you to our members for supporting the channel. My name is NorZZa and I hope you have a great day.